Okay, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to new people, returning friends, whoever you are. Appreciate you tuning in. How was the last week of your life? How did it go? Let's start with the best moments. So what were the best moments? Did you have any moments in your life in the last week that you could look back at and feel fulfilled in, or feel that there was a beauty or that life had meaning? Were there any of those? If not, it's okay. If you can't think of any of those moments, it's okay. But if you have any of those, let's start with that. I have one. I have a very significant and important moment as a parent that happened this week. And I think my yoga practice prepared me for it in a very unique way. And I'll tell you what happened on the other side of today's conversation if you want to stick around for that. I do want to keep this intro a bit short, partially because my talk with James Matthew Brown is a little bit lengthier than others, and I don't want to push the overall length of the episode too long. But also just because, honestly, that good moment I had as a parent was amidst a whole bunch of not good feeling. Like there's a lot about what seems to be happening in my even small scope of looking into the future, I guess. Maybe that's the problem. I'm looking into the future. I mean, if I'm just here in the moment, I do feel fine. But there just is a feeling of things really being off, and that there's a lot of dark vibe about. I don't know how to say that. Maybe that's like a superstitious kind of sentiment, but I felt okay in myself, and I did have this good moment, but it just feels like things have been a challenging time in a lot of sometimes subtle and sometimes overt ways. And I don't know that I would really want to try to get into talking about any specifics. I don't think I know what I would be talking about enough to try to delve into what I feel is making me think that or feel that. It's just a feeling, really. In any case, in some ways, it feels almost fitting with today's conversation. My guest is James Matthew Brown. And James is someone I've never talked to before, but I have certainly known of for many, many years. I explained this some at the beginning of the episode, but my name is Jason Brown, and I've always wrote J. Brown, and his name is James Brown. Because my name is J. and his name is James, and we both have the same last name, we've often been confused with one another. We also both were kind of contrarian voices at a certain moment in the yoga blogosphere years, and wrote critical essays about the Yoga Alliance and yoga teacher training and stuff. So we had some parallel moments, but as I learned, James has a very unique story, and he was also a close student of Maty Ezraty. And Maty is someone I had always hoped that I could bring on the show, but she unfortunately passed, and that never happened. And I've been really wanting to get someone who knew her and could come on and share some thoughts and memories about her. And I was really glad to have James on to do that for us today. Before we get to that, I do want to express some gratitude to the sponsors of this show, our podcast premium subscribers. And I do mean that seriously. Like, we used to have ads, as old-time listeners know, but now we don't. And the people who subscribe to the podcast premium are the sponsors. They're the people who keep this show going. Specifically today, I want to say thank you to Lynn Boardman, and Nicola Varini. Cheers to you both, Lynn and Nicola. If I'm not mistaken, you've both been longtime supporters. Really appreciate you. If you're new around here and you didn't know it, the most recent 52 episodes are always part of our public feed, but we do also have a podcast premium subscription, which gives you access to the full archives, and you become a sponsor of this show. It's choose your rate, cancel anytime, and if there's an old episode that you really wanted to listen to and you don't have money, you just email us and we will hook you up. But if you have even just a little something, it's how stuff like this survives. We're very grateful for people who recognize that and make the gesture of supporting. So if you want to learn more about becoming a podcast premium subscriber or find any of my stuff, I've got ongoing classes and weekly discussion groups if you want to be a part of stuff outside of listening to this. All of my stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay. I think that's good. Like I said, we're keeping it brief. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with James Matthew Brown. Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
My computer's not going to work right now. We're going to have to use the phone.
This is just fine. We're going to go with this.
All right.
I can hear you. You can hear me. We're good to go.
Yes.
And, it is funny for me that we're finally getting this moment to meet.
Yes.
After all of these years.
I'm
glad to speak to you after all these years. It is funny. Let me fill in people who are listening what we're laughing about, because not everyone who listens to this might know this. My full name is Jason Brown. But pretty much wherever I've lived in my life, or like whatever I was pursuing, whatever thing it was, there was always another Jason Brown there. And there was, and there was another Jason Brown who is teaching yoga in Manhattan when I first got into yoga. I believe he started using his middle name, started going by Jason Ray Brown. Shout out to Jason if he ever listens to the show. But
Jason Ray it has a nice ring to it.
It does.
Jason Ray Brown.
I think so too. I do too. So all of my friends used to call me Jay. So I decided to go by J Brown, but I wrote J period Brown as an abbreviation because I also fancied myself a bit of a writer and I thought it was kind of literary sounding or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
I get that.
And your name is James Brown, which has its own set of issues, I'm sure.
Yes, you don't mess with, I don't feel that I have the option to mess with my name like you have gotten to do.
Well, you started using your middle name.
Because it's a national, right. That was a big decision for me, actually, to start using it.
I imagine it would. Well,
it's been made.
Well, the only time we did have some interaction back in what I believe would affectionately be called the yoga blogosphere days that used to exist back in around.
Is it gone now?
I think so. I mean, there's a little
I'm not part of it.
There's a little remnants, but not like back then. I mean, I think we're talking about what, 2012, 2013 or something like that?
2013 was when I wrote my first thing that people read.
Okay, because then I know one of the things that happened is we both wrote like critical blog posts about Yoga Alliance and like the business of yoga teacher training certification.
Yes, we did.
And so that fact that we both did that, like they both got read a lot, and then we both had names that were first letter J, last name Brown. Over the years, I've been confused with you many times, and I imagine the same. I imagine so. So here we are.
James, I signed up for your course, but it's not you. And I'm like, that's because it's not my course.
That's happened. I've refunded a couple of people. Same thing, because I was like, "Oh no, sorry, that's James Brown."
I didn't have to refund anything.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad.
But it delights me that you refunded money because you weren't me.
Well, I guess the other thing is, the other reason I've thought of reaching out to you a couple of different times over the years, honestly, but it always seemed like the times I was thinking about reaching out to you, you were like posting some like intense stuff or whatever. You were like going through stuff, and I was like, "Ooh, maybe you'd want to talk about it." And I was like, So timing is everything, and it feels like now is a better time for us to talk than the other times I was going to reach out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for thinking maybe I'll wait. It probably was a good idea, but this is a really, really good time. I've been really very reflective the past couple of months, and so you actually reached out to me probably the very best time you could have.
See, there you go. Well, I think one of the reasons that I've always wanted to reach out to you, especially since her passing, is that I know you were practiced with Maty Ezraty, and she's somebody, like when I started this show, it was over 7 years ago, I kind of fancied that it would be some kind of like oral history of the way yoga kind of came into the mainstream, because I came into my adulthood like right when that was happening. And she was on a list of maybe about 10 people who I thought, these are the people I would really want to talk to. And I've gotten 7 out of those 10 maybe. And she was one of those 3, and I didn't get a chance to talk to her. So I've always wanted to talk to somebody who knew her. And I know you knew her somewhat well, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, I have considered her my teacher, my only teacher. I mean, not my only teacher. I've had many teachers, but she's my main teacher. And so there's that, but she also very much sort of discovered me as a teacher and gave me a platform and helped me navigate that. And I went on I was her assistant when she did trainings for about 10 years in total. Whenever she was anywhere that I could get to. So her trainings in LA and New York. And that was just such a huge honor for me to be entrusted with that, as it is to now have this opportunity to talk about her legacy and the impact that she had on me and other people, which is substantial. So giving that context, I guess, before I talk about her, so that you know that I really studied her for a long time. She was she was really who I looked up to for, this is what I think a good teacher should be.
Mm. And was she your entry point, or did you have like experience with yoga prior to meeting her?
Oh no, I was teaching for 4 years before I met her. so she was, she was, and that's how I certainly felt like I had never taught before when I started working with her. But
what were you doing before you met her?
Well, I started in Washington, D.C. I'd love to tell you about how I met her and how I learned about her at the time. This is relevant to the conversation. I was teaching the vice president's family. It was when Al Gore was vice president, and taught them through the campaign. And at the same time, and I traveled some with them and was at the convention and whatnot, and really saw like my mission in life was to be, the White House yoga teacher, and really thought that's what was going to happen. And I felt, since I started practicing yoga, that it had such potential to have a positive impact on the world. And I thought, okay, well, this is how I get to do it. Is I'm going to teach the most powerful man in the world more about how we're all connected. Give him an experience of that every day. What a powerful thing that would have been. And that didn't happen, as we all know.
Oh my God! Yes.
So while that was happening, by the way,
did he practice yoga through that?
No. I taught the family. He was quite busy. I saw him after the election. He became very available, but before not. No, I was support for mostly his wife Tipper and also the daughters. One of the daughters actually afterwards came. I'm fast forwarding a bit, but
let me ask you a question about that. Because that's actually very interesting to me, because that was something I wanted to ask you about, because I thought that one of the things that happened at a certain time was like kind of like the celebrity gig thing, where if somebody met like I know you did other ones, like go on tour with somebody, you would get these gigs, these kind of amazing yoga teacher gigs. So how did you get the gig teaching the Gore family?
I'll tell you, but I have to direct this back to Maty.
We will. Okay, go ahead.
The last thing I want Maty to hear from heaven or wherever
No
she's
worries,
listening.
we're going to give Maty
You
her
asked a
due.
question about her, and I talked about how fabulous I was instead. So anyway, back to me. During this time, I was also touring with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So the way that I had met them was I started in DC just by renting a space at the Washington Ballet and put up posters. And at the same time, I was a nightclub promoter, and so some of the DJs I had hired knew were close to a band called Fugazi that's an important independent.
Yes, 13 Songs was like a Bible to me in college.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I don't know their music very well, I'm afraid to say, but I know them really well. They became my really good friends, especially Guy. And then the Red Hot Chili Peppers came to town, and Guy was one of my first regular students, and I couldn't believe it because he was so cool. And I thought, why are you coming to my classes? But he did every week, and so then the Chili Peppers came to town, and they I didn't know, worshipped Fugazi, and so they took me to see them, and we went backstage afterwards and had dinner with them, and they told me that they had just hired their third yoga teacher, and I thought, well, I'm sure if you're fired two, you're probably gonna fire the next one. So I just made it possible for them to get in touch with me if they wanted to, and then 3 weeks later they did. So and asked me to go on tour, and they had the #1 album then, and I went on tour with them, and that I'll tell you how that got me to LA. So then I was going back and forth between the campaign between DC and on tour, because the tour would be 3 weeks on and 2 weeks off, I think, something like that. And so I was going between the two, and it was so funny, like telling Tipper, like, well, I'm teaching this rock band, and she's like, who are they again?
Wasn't she the one who was like the labels for the parents on the albums and stuff?
Right, that was part of why the Chili Peppers wanted to hire me, is they thought it was so ridiculous that I was Tipper Gore's yoga teacher. And I talked to Flea about it, and I was like, Flea, she's so lovely. Like, what is your problem? Like, she's so nice. And he said, well, and I never knew this, and I'm quoting him, so you can fact check this, but I'm just quoting somebody. Flea told me that when those stickers went on the CDs, which was how people sold music then, there was no Apple Music then, or anything, like no streaming services. Walmart wouldn't sell them. And that was the #1 retailer for music in the United States, and that cut their revenue in half. And I thought, okay, I think I get it now. But anyway, so just to give you some context, that's sort of where I was when I started seeing that Gore wasn't going to win and I was like, it just seemed so surreal to me. Like, how is this happening? And I know a lot of people are too young to remember that time.
And it happened in a strange way. That was a weird election. It was like insane. It went on.
I went to bed.
The court decided it. It was very strange.
I went to bed like thinking, which bedroom am I going to sleep in the first night in the White House?
Wow. I mean, you had a front row seat. That's crazy.
And then I woke up, and like it was. The TV was still on, and it said Bush is the president, and I was like, hold on a second. And so anyway, so then I called Maty. I had heard that Maty was the person in LA. I knew that I didn't want to stay in DC, and I called and I said, look, I think I am going to move to LA because I'm here for the Gores, and I know this. I teach this band, and the thing that she said, and this is the first moment I thought I might love you, Maty, is I said Gore might not win, and she said he better fucking win.
Yeah.
And it's the word fuck that I'm talking about.
Yeah, the irreverence. Yeah.
People say it all the time now. It's not a big deal, but yoga teachers did not really say that. And I thought, oh, you might be like a normal person, like which I hadn't really met in the yoga world, but also I just really liked her. And so then when I was in LA next, I went to meet her, and she took a liking to me and hired me to teach, and that's how I met her.
How did you even know about her to reach out to her if you hadn't met her yet? You just heard about her? Had she started Yoga Works already? I mean, I know what year we're talking about.
Yeah. Yoga Works at that time was like, I think Yoga Journal had just said it was the yoga mecca. That was a thing. I think they said all roads lead to Yoga Works, or there was something like that, which at the time was I mean, that's not necessarily true that all lead yoga works, but it was pretty influential at the time. This is when there were only two studios, and they were completely run by Maty. And the thing that Yoga Works, I mean, this is debatable, but one of the things that Yoga Works really provided that was quite new was one studio that had multiple practices and techniques being taught.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was like always like a multidisciplinary whatever offerings. It wasn't just one approach or one style or whatever. And
so while we're on that, I mean, I really want to focus on just like the heart of Maty, and this is a little bit more like the Yoga Works brand, but this is something that I think they really brought to the yoga world that was really a positive thing. Is that having the multiple disciplines under one roof. What happened was they started teaching teacher training, and most of the early teacher trainings were taught by Lisa Walford and Maty. And so both of them had done some Ashtanga and some Iyengar, but one of them was really an Iyengar teacher and one of them was really an Ashtanga teacher. And, there were other people, that were influential that were from other practices. So what that brought about is, I mean, yes, you can say it's sort of a combo of those styles, but I think that's really superficial. What it brought about is this questioning quality of, well, what are we trying to do in this moment? Like, if there are three ways to do triangle pose, well, why are we doing this triangle pose in this moment? What do you gain by having your foot here? What do you lose by having your foot here? And that, I think, was not really present in yoga teaching much before then. The questioning and thinking, let's figure out how we want to do it for our needs right now, instead of what would the guru say? What is
right, or what does the picture look like? Or
right, what does the picture look like? Maybe let's not do the picture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting, and I mean, we can go there now, or we can come back to, because I wanted to hear more about the earlier times of yoga back then. Like,
sure.
But I guess you did touch on it, and just to put a pin in it, that that quality. I think you're right. That Yoga Works questioning quality that you're pointing to. It's interesting. That's what it started, but later on, things did get standardized some, and I don't know if that was as much the same. We can talk about how things evolved over the years. I think that happened with almost all approaches. Almost all approaches that happened. Iyengar, Ashtanga, whatever one you want. It happened in all of them as they got larger and scaled and standardized.
Yeah,
things changed.
They did.
Well, let's go to like these early times when you're like have these kind of sweet yoga teaching gigs, and you go to meet Maty. You just thought I wanted someone to study with, and she seemed like the person you wanted to go with. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I felt like I had met somebody that when you meet somebody that you fall in love with, which isn't what happened, but I mean, I do love her, but that's not the feeling that I'm trying to convey. But when you do meet somebody that you fall in love with, you sort of know, okay, this is somebody that was put in my path for a reason. And while it wasn't quite falling in love, it was very clear to me from the beginning that I was to listen to her.
All right. So what, do you relocate to Los Angeles to hang out with her?
Yeah, but I mean, not to overly romanticize it. There was no way I was staying in DC with Bush as president. So it wasn't only the draw of Maty. I'm from DC. I'm like 6th or 7th generation Washingtonian, and I just felt it was not my town anymore. Like just if you're interested in that moment, something I haven't really ever been able to share is because it sounds like you're familiar with it, is the vice president's mansion, where Kamala Harris lives now, is very close to a public thoroughfare. And one of the things that I did, so the time for your younger listeners, there were, I think, 27 or 28 days where we didn't know who the president was going to be. And during that time, there were a number of Supreme Court hearings about it. Tipper would schedule, I want to be careful how much I say here because, it's private. I won't talk about what happened, but we would start practicing as soon as the Supreme Court went into session, and then the Secret Service would tell us when it was over. That was a lot of responsibility. And, I can't even really talk about it without getting emotional about it just because of how intense it was. That, you know, I had seen this opportunity to really, for the world to really change. I really, really believed in Mr. Gore and what he was going to do. And so while teaching her, one of the moments that's seared into my head is being in their living room and trying to just bring some peace to the moment. And there were protesters outside screaming, "Get out of Dick Cheney's house." And I don't know why. I guess I just want to share that because of just how incredibly bizarre it is.
That's insane. So that's incredibly insane.
I haven't ever told anybody about that.
I mean, I've heard about a lot of crazy yoga teacher moments or gigs.
I think that
I think that might take the cake, James. I mean, that's crazy town that you were there in that moment teaching yoga to them. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it was. And we, you know, we became very close through that experience. And I think everybody that was there, you know, it was, you know, it'll never leave us. So contrast that with, I have this rock band in LA and Maty, and, you know, it was almost like I don't want to compare it to Arjuna, but you know, the scales of Bhagavad Gita with the riches on one side and the spirit and on the other. DC was really my soul, and LA just seemed like a bunch of glitter to me. But
I grew up in Los Angeles, and I left when I was 18 and came to New York. So the only other place I know some, and you know, LA has its own beast. It's like it's not DC.
Yeah, I know that.
Its own.
I know that now. See, something really funny about touring with them was that was my first time going to LA. I'd been to LA just really briefly before, but I'd never really stayed there. And so I went there with the Chili Peppers, who were the #1 band in the world at that time. And so what I didn't realize was the experience I was having with them was not a normal experience.
No.
So I went home to DC for one of the breaks, and I saw that there was garbage in my waste paper basket. And I realized I hadn't seen garbage in like 3 weeks. Like all the garbage cans I saw were just empty. And
somebody emptied them, not you.
Right, I didn't. I realized that. I realized then that LA wasn't. This was after I moved to LA, back to LA, and I was like, "Wow, this isn't how it was when I first came here." I realized that my perspective was a little skewed at the beginning.
All right, so you what year is it when you go to LA? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember. It was 2001. So as soon as the election was decided in January or December, and then I moved there on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and I think I tried out at Yoga Works a few days later for Maty. She just had me. I didn't try out.
What was that like? A class? You just taught a class?
No, it was.
What was the audition for Maty?
Well, it's so awesome. I feel so lucky to have gone through this. So you know, there was lead up to it. We talked, and we talked on the phone before after the "he better fucking win" and the "he didn't win, I'm coming" conversation. She asked me to come to a class, and I can't remember. I think it was lead Ashtanga. I think it was a lead Ashtanga class. But I remember where I was in the room, but I don't remember what the class was. Anyway, so I took it. And after the class, she said, "I think you're going to need to take our teacher training before you start teaching here." And I'd never taken teacher training. Wasn't really... That may sound...
Isn't that interesting? So you had the primo gigs without... I mean, I guess that's true. There really wasn't teacher training programs, so there wasn't one to take. You just decided you were a teacher.
Teachers. I had my first teacher was an Iyengar teacher in training, and he was really, really good. He was taught by John Schumacher, who's one of the great Iyengar teachers, and he was getting certified through Unity Woods, and he was a really, really good teacher. My first yoga class, I thought, this is what I want to do forever, and I give him credit for that. And I just want all the people out there trying to make these crazy, fun, exciting classes to know that happened sitting in hero pose, because he actually taught a practice of focus, which is what I understood for the first 7 years of practicing was what we were there for. So anyway, I had him, and then I started practicing with a new Ashtanga teacher, but he had been teaching movement for a long time. And so back then you could just ask questions. Like when I was teaching the Gores, I took that really seriously. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right, and I would call them and say, like, how should I handle this? And they would just tell me, and then I would do it, and then I would talk to them. So that was really how I understood how you learn to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and I'd been teaching for 2 or 3 years. And then when I met Maty, she said, I think you should probably take the training. Also, there were so few teachers then that when I started teaching, I was quite popular in DC. I was quite popular. There just weren't very many teachers. Like there was one teacher at the gym that I first started teaching at, and I went to that gym and said, maybe you need to go. And so they hired me, and I was popular from the beginning, really because I think there weren't very many teachers. So I didn't really have a need for teacher training. So
what do you think? What do you think it was that Maty saw that she felt you needed more training?
I should correct that and say I didn't think I needed teacher training because of that. I certainly did need teacher training. I just didn't know. And so when Maty saw that, she said, I'd like to take training, but we have one starting up like in 2 days. And it was 4 weeks then, or 6 weeks. I think it was 6 weekends. It wasn't 4 weeks. I think it was 6 weekends. Any YogaWorks people listening, it was 2001. So I think we were at 6 weekends then. And then it became 8, then it became 10. But this is 6. And so it was taught by Lisa and Maty, and I took it. And God, it was just so, I've taught like 45 or 50 teacher training since then. And when I think of the people that were in my training with me, they were all serious practitioners. Like they'd been practicing for a long time. Mm-hmm. And like I could only hold headstand for like 3 minutes, and that was an embarrassment. and now I'm not saying there's anything wrong with not being able to hold a headstand.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but that was definitely a way that you measured it. That was a measurement, right? How long you could hold a headstand.
At Unity Woods, when I wanted to go to a next level class, that was one of the things was, can you hold a 10-minute headstand?
Right.
And I couldn't. And so I didn't go. And, anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
I know. My we point can get to that, but that's interesting.
Well, just in case we don't get to it, I do not measure the quality of a yogi body.
Yes, things have changed a lot since then,
including my perspective. But my 3-minute headstand could not stack up against the other people in my training.
I see.
That's all I have to say. So then I started teaching there. My first class on the schedule was replacing Eric Schiffman. And so I don't know who he is.
You know, one of the only classes I ever took at YogaWorks was Eric Schiffman's class, because I went back to visit and I took his class. You had to take over for him. That's not an easy shoe to follow.
No. It was made very, very clear to me that I wasn't actually replacing Eric Schiffman. And that was not possible for a beginning yoga teacher, that I was simply taking his time slot. So, and I didn't understand what that meant until I started teaching and I started talking to people about there were no students because they all went to.
Yeah, they were. I believe Eric had his
Sacred Movement had just opened, and he took his classes there, and so anyway, that was my beginning, and that time slot, it wasn't the right one or the people, the clientele really for me, and I got moved after one schedule, but then Maty started to understand me better and how I could be useful, and found slots for me where I would excel.
Well, that's interesting. I guess my question is, what was Maty like? Like, what was your relationship with her? Was she more like old school in terms of like the teachers who were kind of a little bit more on high, or was she as accessible as that phone conversation, as you said?
She was accessible. Absolutely. She would cringe at being thought of as being in any way better or more elevated than any other person or any of her students. Like she absolutely rejects that.
Yeah.
So do you want me to tell
That's a
you more about what
departure
she was
from all
like?
the gurus. That's a departure from the guru authority figures that they had.
Yeah, I mean, she was an authority figure, but she was not to be worshipped in any way, or it just. I mean, I don't want to throw the word worship around, but that was not only was that really important to me as a student, but what a great example she was setting for the teachers that she was working with. Was, this isn't so that you can get your ego fed. This is so that you can transmit a practice, which is what she did.
And what do you remember the training being like? What gaps did it fill for you, or what changed about your practice and your teaching from doing that training?
I don't know that the training itself was a huge breakthrough. Well, I guess there were some. One is that it was the first time that I was part of a community of people that were like me, which was really, really valuable. It also made me know that I was in the right place. The training did that. Like, I thought, wow, these people actually really know what they're talking about. And that made me really happy, because in DC, I had good teachers, but it was nothing like what I was being exposed to. It was like I had been going to an online community college on a TRS-80 in like 1995. There was no online then. My metaphor's not working.
They don't know what a TRS-80 is, man.
Oh, well, it's a really old computer.
You dated us bad there,
so
man.
I was attending, it's like I was attending community college online a long time ago, and suddenly I had a scholarship to, I don't want to say Harvard, they get too much credit, but something like that. So I felt like I was in the right place. I also remember just really wanting Maty I was focused on her the whole time, and it wasn't so much the curriculum that I was interested in. It was just, I knew that I found somebody that I wanted to follow. So that happened. And then I started teaching, for her, for YogaWorks. So I wanted to tell you about the hiring part. So I did the teacher training, and then I had a job at Sports Club LA, which is now, I think it's Equinox now.
Okay.
But it was a really sort of high end, but also really, I think, high quality gym in LA, in Westwood. In Westwood, I forgot what that area is called.
Oh, I know where that is.
I haven't been there in a while. Anyway,
UCLA is right there.
I taught there in DC when I was in DC. So when I went to LA, I was able to teach it at the branch there. So I had that job, and so after I took the teacher training, Maty said, "I would like to come there and watch your class." And I was like, "What the fuck?" And so she did, and she sat in the back with her little notepad, and she gave me a ride home, and that was really the beginning of her mentoring me. She hired me, but I remember her saying, and this took years for me to fix. She said they say that your classes are too easy, like you're the easy teacher, and I thought my classes were so hard. I really thought they were so hard. And she said, "No, they think you're really easy." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "You don't let them move enough." And I'm like, "That's because their chaturangas suck." And she's like, "You have to just let them do it." And I'm like, "Maty, I just took this training with you, where none of us could do anything like that. And you're telling me." And she was like, I mean, she didn't want me to do anything injurious, but she was like, you have the knowledge, the technique and stuff, but you have to actually, work with these people. And so then she gave me some real practical advice about how to bring movement, which is basically what they meant. And then they also, I don't think they liked how technical I was. I'm really I'm not anymore, super technical teacher. And I think I was pretty good at it, but if people are coming to get a little workout and, they're like, "Oh, let's go to the wall and do triangle pose for 35 minutes.
Right.
they're going to be kind of turned off. And so, so she helped. That was kind of the first thing that she helped do. That did take me a really long time to get to where I was able to teach what I thought to be flow safely. And then after I did it, I thought, I still don't like it. And and so I stopped teaching flow.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I don't know that a lot of people know that that's when whatever vinyasa became a style. And it happened at Jivamukti too, where initially, like you said, at Yoga Works, there was just different teachers who had studied Shivananda and Iyengar and Ashtanga, and like they were all these different teachers teaching at the same centers. But at some point, they did kind of develop their teacher training in like a Jivamukti method. And at some point, it seemed like the things became about, there was a kind of hybriding or like a flow kind of approach, which became called vinyasa practice, where people could be very creative with sequencing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Yoga Work certainly became known for that as well. Was Maty teaching in that way? Was she kind of doing straight Ashtanga or Iyengar style? Because it sounds like you had a more like Iyengar minded practice and people wanted a more like flow kind of class.
Oh, Maty was very much a devotee. Maty was a practitioner, a daily practitioner of Ashtanga, but she was also a very devoted Iyengar student. And I think that, I don't know, in her last years, what her daily practice was. The last time I worked with her, which was in India about 7 years ago, I think, she was still practicing Ashtanga each day. But even then, she was going to India. I'm sorry, I just remembered something she told me in India, that trip. She was going to India and spending a month with Mr. Iyengar as well. Mm-hmm. Can I just share that? I really
yes, I would like to hear it. Go ahead.
Really
I thought that's where you were going. Go for it.
I really need to talk about what you asked me, though.
That doesn't matter. Were you studying with Mr. Iyengar as well?
No, I would not study with Mr. Iyengar because I think he's really mean from everything I've heard about him. And I can't go to a mean teacher. And so that's what the conversation was about. I mean, I think Mr. Iyengar was fine with me not going. I love Iyengar yoga so much. And I thought for a long time about becoming an Iyengar teacher, and I still think it is an incredible practice. If people want to do yoga now, and they're somewhere where I don't know a teacher, then I feel confident recommending them to find an Iyengar teacher. So I just want to say that. However, I don't think teachers should be mean, and I don't want to go into detail about how I came to that opinion, but I mean, there are lots of things, and so that's what
that certainly became an issue in the yoga world later on. Like that, those authorities don't have the same, like people don't look to the same like lineage traditions as authorities because of stuff like that.
Yeah, and I've heard that so many times about, well, he's Indian and he's old, and I understand. I don't want to argue about whether or not that should happen. I'm simply saying I am not going to go to a teacher like that. Right. And so we were talking about that, Maty and I. She had just spent a month in India, and she was showing me. I want to be very discreet, which she would insist upon, but she was just showing me something funny that he had done that I thought was also kind of mean. That's all. And it was so funny. And so she's doing it. She's like standing up. She's like, 4'11", and she was just so funny when she tried to imitate people. And so anyway, she did it, and I was laughing so hard. And then I was like, but Maty, why do you go to him if he's mean? And she said, I want the information. Mm-hmm. And it was just, I loved it so much. I was like, God, you're such a better person than that.
Well, I mean, different temperaments and different teachers.
Right. But I do envy that. Yeah, I do envy a person that can see a person with baggage and not let it.
But that's the question. It's can you separate the information from the person?
I can.
Yeah, and then some people could, and maybe some people couldn't. I guess.
I think I can better now. Well, I can. Like the information, I do think is amazing.
She brought back some of the information, maybe.
But even everything I've learned from every Iyengar teacher I've ever been to, like the man made a system that is highly functional and evolving. And
I guess it's interesting. I guess I've talked about this, that the method, if you will, within it has all these like individual people and personalities and expressions, and so how the method gets taught, or like you could teach Iyengar in a way that wasn't mean.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think Iyengar.
Like Iyengar is not inherently mean unless you're emulating that style of teaching.
That's a conversation that I know has been had before. Is Iyengar yoga mean? I don't think it is. I just want to say out loud, Chris Stein is the least mean person I've ever met in my life, and she's a fantastic Iyengar teacher, and her classes are nothing but love and support. And she is totally an Iyengar teacher. She would cook for him when he came to LA, and also Lisa Walford was a longtime teacher of mine. Not mean, never saw her be mean to a student ever. So it's not the method. But I'd like to get back. I think that there are plenty of people that know a lot more than I do about the Iyengar world. So I'll leave talking about that to them.
But it's relevant because those were the influences, and those what everybody was drawing upon. And then the way that teachers were with their students. Again, when you talk about Maty going to your class and then driving you home like that I don't know many people who had that happen with Mr. Iyengar or Mr. Patavi Joyce. I know some people with Desikachar had experiences like that, but that kind of like relationship to a teacher.
So sweet.
Yeah, I know, right? But because he did, like some people, but later on when it became bigger, not as many, so I guess it's a very rare thing that you have those kind of moments with teachers like that, so it was an evolution.
Then. She was just so humble. Something just to drop one more name. I was Sting's yoga teacher for a while. And I just want you to shout out to Sting. So are a lot of other people. Sting is very eclectic, and
I remember him going to Jivamukti in New York. I would see him in class.
He's good friends. They were good friends with them. But I took that as a great responsibility as well, because at the time Sting and Trudy, I was teaching both of them, were sort of ambassadors to the yoga world, and I thought, what the hell am I doing teaching them? And I wanted to make sure that what I was doing with them was up to snuff, and so I wanted to bring Maty. This is also something that would probably never happen with a lot of today's leading teachers, but I wanted to bring Maty, and she had no idea who he was, and I loved that so much. And I said, well, he's a singer, and she's like, what kind of music? And I was like, he's really, really famous. and he's actually known, Maty, for doing yoga. And she's like, really? And so
Ashtanga yoga at that,
Ashtanga yoga. Like just a story, since you seem to be interested, that is so funny, that really sort of humbled me, was I was teaching Trudy, and she was doing something that I thought she shouldn't do with her knees. That's all I'm going to say. And I was like, why are you doing that? She was doing, it was just a knee position that in that moment was not something that I thought we should do. And I said, why are you doing that? And she said, well, Patavi was here last week staying with us. And I was like, okay, I guess it's good. So anyway, I took it, that was terrifying. And so,
tag teaming with Patavi. Oof. What?
I wouldn't call it that. I think I was the guy that showed up to make sure she did her yoga. I mean, I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't mean it that way. They were absolutely delightful. I mean, I believe that she got her most potent instruction from perhaps Patavi, and I was sort of facilitating, I'll say.
Even just asking the question about whether or not that's a good knee position or not. That's
but then I actually looked into it. Well, I actually looked into it, and I found that was actually a good way to rehabilitate scar tissue, and it was something that I didn't know before then. And now I tell people to do it when they So anyway, so that's the moment when I said to Maty, look, I have these clients that I'd like you to see what I'm doing with them, and she didn't know who they were, and they sent they didn't do this for me, but they sent a limousine for her. And she, that had never happened before. And she was like, who are these people? And we met there that day, I think. And yeah, because I wasn't in the limo. So yeah. And I just want everybody to know Maty was not a limo riding teacher. Like that. She had a Honda
Did
Civic.
she have other like celebrity clientele as well, or was that?
No, she didn't teach. She didn't teach private. And I mean, there were celebrities in and out of yoga work all the time. I don't think Maty knew who they were. And
let me ask you a question.
Care.
Did you, at that time, had you already started being involved with teacher trainings at her place at that point? Or did that happen later?
I think that was sort of around the same time. So this is probably around 2003 or 4. And so after I'd been teaching there for a few years, I asked if I could assist. She and Chuck taught a training together. Chuck was her partner, who I've always considered sort of my main philosophy guide, sort of. Like I take questions to him that he answers. And so that was such a wonderful partnership for me as an aspirant. And they taught a training together, and I wasn't going to miss that. And so I asked if I could assist it. And so I assisted it, and I brought some sort of, I had taught as an adjunct professor of yoga at American University before I came to DC, to LA. And so I knew how to run a course academically, and I guess they hadn't thought to do that in the teacher training world was very new.
Yeah.
And so they were sort of impressed that I took roll. which they weren't doing it before.
No, that was like the days of
not everybody's coming every weekend.
That was like the day of cigar boxes. I remember when I went to study with Richard Freeman, there was literally a cigar box with money in it, and you just made change at the door. Like there was no registration or anything, And
I also tracked who was doing the homework, because I was gradient, and they had never done that. So, but I mean, that's not that it makes them sound like they were being foolish.
No, but at that time, did they have a very structured curriculum, or was it more free flowing?
Well, I wouldn't call it free flowing. I think that because they themselves had compiled the content, they had a lot more liberty to shift it as the needs of the training dictated.
Right.
But it was certainly not like, oh, what are we going to do today? No, they definitely had an agenda.
But that's interesting that you say that they were the ones who had the material or created the material. So if they needed to change things or shift things, they could. That's very
So I really want to talk about the expansion of yoga and what we talked about earlier.
Well, because that's what I was getting at. That it seems to me at some point Yoga Works get big and they sell it and it changes into something else. And you were there for that, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. I was there. When I got there, there were 2 studios. It was sold to a venture capital company, I actually don't know how many years later. I think it was 2006 or 7. And so that's when Maty left. I really can't remember which year it was, so don't hold me to that. But in the mid 2000s.
And what was that like? Was that fraught, or was that why do you think she chose to do that? Was it just she didn't want to run it anymore?
I can't speak for her, and I actually don't know why. But I don't blame her. I know that she had got, I mean, this was quite public. It's not secret that there had been lots of offers. It was a really, really amazing yoga studio. And it had so many influential teachers had started there, and it just had such a huge community. And it was I think I didn't really do that much with running the business, but it appeared to be a very well-run business. And so, it was something that people wanted to buy. And I guess, I don't know, maybe the timing was right, but so I can't speak for Maty, but I can speak as a teacher. It was exciting. I thought that it was what the yoga world needed. I thought that Maty's teaching was going to be spread around. I was really, really happy about it. The teacher training program, which by then I was teaching teacher training. No, I wasn't teaching teacher training by then. I may have taught 1. So it was around that time Maty left. And when she left, she identified for the new owners the people that she thought could teach accurately what she taught. And so they were Julie Kleinman, Catherine Monroe, Natasha Rizopoulos, me, and then some that were already teaching, like Andy Carpenter, Lisa Walford. And I am very sorry if I left anybody off the list. That's who I remember, and those are the people that I taught with. Oh my God, now people I might have forgotten. I'm so sorry. But there was just a few people. And we very quickly expanded the teacher training program. And that's where this started, is how do we take this massive information that we have, this, all of these Xerox things and all of these lesson plans and the stuff that's not written down, and turn it into a scalable training. And I think that, and Julie and Lisa led this very much, and much thought was put into it. It was a huge project that we all undertook with great seriousness. I think that we came up with a pretty good scalable teacher training program. And then I went and taught that. I taught the first export training for YogaWorks, the first one that wasn't in LA, which was in Seattle. And then I went and taught it in Asia a bunch of times. And so
was it structured to fit to the, by that time there was 200 hours. Was it structured to fit in with that?
No, we had not sought Yoga Alliance. I say I'm not there anymore, but YogaWorks had not at that time signed on with Yoga Alliance. YogaWorks resisted that for a long time. And there was a point that, as many of us know, one had to be Yoga Alliance.
Including the Iyengar Institute did it too, yes.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. I did not know that.
I remember it specifically.
Right.
Well, what they did anyway, is they had a year-long, like the gold standard year-long thing, and they had, like many hoops, it was an extensive process. But then they eventually offered 200-hour Yoga Alliance trainings as well, like 200 hours in Iyengar teaching. Like it was like a different thing. I mean, I don't know if they still do it. They used to. I know they did at one point.
So I've never said this, and I want to say it, but I think we really got it all wrong. Like the whole.
So that's interesting. That's what I was going to ask you. I appreciate you making that admission, because what you said is, and I agree. You put together people who really were there with Maty and had a real experience, and you guys got together and you said, let's make something good, and I'm sure it was. But something happens once it scales up. And when you said that just now, like, we got it all wrong, what did you mean? Like, I'm sure you got a lot of things right, but what did you get wrong when you said that? What did you mean?
I mean, I could go on for hours, but let me hit some highlights. I don't believe that this is meant to be a group practice. I think that this is an individual thing that you learn individually. You can practice it in groups, yes. Mm-hmm. When I started doing Ashtanga with a group, I'm so glad I did it with a group, but I was doing an individual practice in that room, and I mean, you can absolutely, I guess I should be really careful and thorough how I say this. I do think that the things that are called yoga, that are group classes right now, most of them are really lovely. Like I like them. Like they're nice. They're very nice things for lots of reasons. They're not the practice.
I think it's interesting. I mean, you could say I could say they're not the practice I learned. They're not in any way a yoga practice. Okay, I think I get what you're saying. Here, let me ask you a question about it. So it seems to me what I hear you saying, because I gravitated to Eskachar teachings, I think for a similar reason, because it was all about personal practice. It's practice that you bring yourself to, that you do by yourself at home, essentially. And then you can go do that with other people as well. But there's a certain sensibility about that. And I've always said that there was a time in yoga where all these yoga teachers I knew never practiced by themselves at home. Like the only practice they ever did was going to other people's yoga classes. Yeah. And everything became so self-circulating, and there was all these teachers who were having people do stuff in their classes that they didn't have the discipline to do by themselves at home. And I just thought that doesn't make sense. So I hear what you're saying, that and it's interesting when it comes to teacher training as well.
I'm just kidding.
What's that?
I said I feel attacked.
Do you? I didn't mean to attack.
No, I was joking. I was joking.
Oh, okay.
When you said teachers teaching things they can't do at home.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not terrible and I don't think a teacher can teach outside of their own personal practice. Don't get me wrong.
Right, I don't either. I shouldn't have made that joke, because I'm very, very, very strongly of the opinion that one should not teach things that they don't practice.
Well,
wanna
I
be very
also
clear about
think,
that.
I mean, I think you can teach things that you've practiced that might be right for someone that aren't right for you right now. But I think what
Oh,
you're
right. You
getting
don't have
to,
to. No, I'm sorry. You don't have to be practicing it currently. But I think.
yeah, you have
I
to
mean,
know it. Yeah.
I get this question. I got it. I don't teach teacher training anymore, but I got it a lot. Is can you teach something that you can't do yet? And the most practical, I think, useful answer to that is.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.